Y cuando son las 3 de la tarde arrancamos este nuevo panel, nuevo urbanismo y nuevas necesidades, porque sin duda en los últimos meses nos hemos dado cuenta que quizá hay que replantearse pues, los paradigmas de nuestro estilo de vida, pues la concepción que teníamos del trabajo, del ocio, de nuestras relaciones sociales o también pues, del propio urbanismo de nuestras propias ciudades. Y es que la cuestión es si a partir de ahora las ciudades tienen que tener una perspectiva más social, mirando también de frente hacia la sostenibilidad. Y esto no es nuevo, esto ha pasado en otros momentos de la historia, cuando se decidió pues, incorporar, por ejemplo, las fuentes a las plazas, ensanchar las calles o incluso sacar los cementerios del centro de las ciudades. Pues ahora nos encontramos en un nuevo momento que requiere también unas nuevas necesidades. Estos meses atrás, cuando salíamos a pasear después del confinamiento más duro, echábamos de menos unas calles más anchas, unas aceras más anchas. Pues de eso se trata, de eso vamos a hablar ahora, porque son los retos que tenemos por delante. Y para ello vamos a contar con Ricky Bardet, profesor en la London School Economics, que ya lo tenemos aquí en nuestra pantalla y que nos va a acompañar en este panel de hoy, al que saludamos. Bienvenido. Y también al exalcalde de Barcelona y profesor asociado en IBEI, Joan Clos. Muy buenas tardes. Y este panel va a estar moderado por Aurora Catà, que es presidenta de la Barcelona Global. Tiene una amplia trayectoria profesional y va a ser ella quien conduzca todas estas cuestiones que van a tener a ver con el urbanismo y estas nuevas necesidades. Así que les dejo con este interesante panel. Hasta ahora.
So thanks for attending this session, where I have the privilege to act as a moderator of two city planning giants. Ricky Bardet, hello, and Joan Clos as a former mayor of the city. But prior to present them and begin this sort of debate, let me thank Consorcio Zona Franca for being a brave institution that has wonderfully organized this big event where thousands of professionals from different sectors will have the chance to debate, think, connect, and do business in a new context and in a new era, the pandemic era. Being innovative is an attitude, and not all organizations have this attitude. Consorci de la Zona Franca is acting instead of waiting, is being brave, innovative, and using this awful crisis as an excuse, as an opportunity to test new ways of adding value. Congratulations to the team. As I said at the beginning, this is a debate with two giants of city planning. But instead of mentioning them as city planners, let me allow mentioning them as city transformators, which I think could be a more accurate term. Both Joan Clos and Ricky Bardet are city transformators because, due to their experience, and they are among the most talented practitioners on how to really transform cities. Joan is a medical doctor that in the early 80s began his career in the Barcelona City Council, leading something that now could be familiar, public health in the city. You will be very busy these days. From that position, he never stopped assuming new responsibilities until becoming elected mayor for several terms. So Joan Clos is an essential part of the huge transformation of this city did, from being a grey industrial city in crisis into becoming one of the most admired cities for its ability to transform itself. Renewing Ciutat Vella, developing the seafront, taking care of the huge Olympic debt, and organizing a competitive public administration among many other achievements of Joan. From there, he moved to become Spanish Minister of Industry, and later on Spanish Ambassador in Turkey, and lately being elected United Nations Executive Director for Habitat, which means he has set the new urban agenda for many, many cities. Ricky Bardet is the leader of the London School of Urban Studies, where he has been teaching and training the global elite of urbanism and has developed new concepts on how to deal with cities. Italian and Londoner by choice, he has always been at the center of all the city debates. Also has been director of the Architecture Biennale of Venice, and has also been leading huge urban transformations like 2012 Olympic transformation of East London. He's also a fan of Barcelona, and let me add an advertorial. He's one of the actors casting on the Barcelona 2050 documentary that Barcelona Global has launched some weeks ago. I recommend to all of you to have, to the audience, to go to the Barcelona website and see it, and to be part of the debate on shaping cities. And let me introduce myself. I am Barcelona Global's president, a non-profit organization with more than 1,000 members, aiming to make Barcelona one of the best cities in the world for talent and economic activity. So after introductions, and to start the debate, let me share with you some statements before coming to the questions. The first thing is that for the first time in human history, we are among the people living in cities, the number of people living in cities is higher than people living in rural environments. And this is a trend that is expected to increase in the future. The importance of the role of the cities is increasing, and the future of the cities will greatly impact all of our futures. When we are facing major challenges, and in those challenges, cities are the front for, global warming, water supply, technology disruption, aging in our cities, pandemic, smart and sustainability, mobility, house affordability, cities has something to say on all these issues. Cities play or could play an important role in economic development, bringing opportunities and increasing equality to their citizens and contributing to sustainability. And urban planning is used or could be used as a tool to develop our immediate environment and shape the future of these citizens in these cities. So having said that, these statements, I think we will share part of them. I am sure that you will look for having a good discussion after that. And let me start the debate with a first big question. Having cities to face this big challenge, I've already said, is really urban planning a tool to deal with all of them? And how can urban planning, become part of the solution? So maybe, Joan, if you want to start with the answer.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, Ricky, and thank you for the invitation, Aurora. And I think that urban planning has a problem because in a way, the name urban planning is out of fashion, but the issue of urban planning is more important than ever. Then we are in a kind of contradictory situation where it's not fashionable to talk about planning in general, because with the neoliberal ideology, the free markets and this kind of general stereotypes are there just to condemn planning. But at the other part, cities need to have some drawings. You need to draw the place where public space is going to be. You cannot leave the public space to the forces of the market, etc. There are many questions that affects the future of cities related to the physical design. I prefer lately to talk about urban planning as a physical design, which is not the only design that the city needs, because the city also needs a legal design, a regulatory design, they need a financial design, but of course, what was usually associated with urban planning, it's also as neat as ever or even more, and it's the physical design of the city.
But can I add something to that, Joan?
Please,
Of course.
Ricky.
First of all, I'm very jealous that I'm not with you in Barcelona to discuss these issues, because your city has been a model, not just for the last 20, 30 years, but for the last 150 years, of how to connect exactly what Joan has just been saying. Yes, Joan, you may be right that it's not very fashionable to talk about urban planning, but let's underline the fact that it's never been so important. The linking of the physical world, by which I mean, and you mean, the streets, the spaces between them, the parks, whether a city is condensed and compact and full of life, or whether it's sprawling forever across Australian cities or African cities, are deeply connected with two things. One is social equity, and the second is environmental sustainability. And I think in one way, those arguments are being talked about more than before. But I think what Joan is saying is that planning is seen as just a rather boring technical thing, when actually it's exactly about creating places we want to live in, and therefore they have to have a sort of sex appeal about them. They have to be lively places where people want to go, most importantly to exchange ideas, to exchange information, and to get jobs. And unless we organize the physical environment together with the economy and social equity, and clearly the environmental aspects are equally important, we will be creating a whole new generation of cities which are literally unsustainable, when this is the moment that we can do something about it.
So, Ricky, following with your answer, you say that the urbanism is, or the urban planning is really a key tool to achieve this equality, this sustainability, a key tool to answer the challenges we have been talking before. So how can the urban planning do it? I mean, what is needed to take into account to be part of the solution of these challenges?
Well, again, as Joan has already alluded to, planning is incredibly important as long as you just don't see it as a technical exercise, right? It has to be seen as one of a series of layers of organization of society which delivers equity, sustainability, and many other things. And I would say that what you need, first of all, in order to deliver good planning vision and good ideas, is a governance structure that works. And we can come back to this, but in London, we have been trying to copy Barcelona for the last 20, 30 years in terms of the way you are organized, in terms of delivering big visions on the ground. So the second part of that is the regulation. You can have an idea, you might have a good mayor, but if you don't have the infrastructure of regulation to do things on the ground, that becomes very difficult. And thirdly, you need to, yes, have community support for what you do, but that's why we have elections, and that's why mayors need to put their ideas forward, implement them, and then if they're successful, they get re-elected, like Joan, Maragall, and many others did, or not, and then you move on. But I think planning as a view of sustainable living is absolutely needs to be at the center of any political agenda.
This it's something that helps me for the following questions that we will first address to you, Joan. As the title of the debate is New Urban Planning, and after having heard Ricky, and although Barcelona has been recognized several times for its excellent urban planning, and considering how urban planning could help to find solutions to these challenges, do you think that is a new city plan is needed in Barcelona? Do you think a new CERDA plan, for example, is needed in this city? And I think that you are in an excellent position to answer this question.
Yes, I think that cities, they are not, cities are a living organism. It's not a machine. The city is an organism, and it's alive. Therefore it changes. And it needs to change, because it doesn't change, it becomes petrified. And you know, we have seen some petrified cities in the world, but the petrified cities, they don't serve the purpose of providing livelihood for the people. Therefore, I think that in the London School, and thanks to Ricky and his friends like Richard Sennett, they have developed this concept of the open planning, which means that you need to re-challenge your plan constantly.
Time to time.
Constantly, not even time to time, constantly because the life is changing. This goes a little bit against our tradition in the continental Europe, where we used to think about the law as a kind of written in stone. But this is not useful anymore. We need to adapt to the change. For example, when I was in 1999, our foreign population in Barcelona, I mean out of the European Union, was 3%.
1999.
Now is 16%. Then, you know, it's not the same city. You cannot think that you will address the problems of Barcelona with the same paradigms of 99. Therefore, you need to be adapting to the changing circumstances. And this is very complex in nowadays governance, because we have shared responsibilities between the central government, the regional government, the local government, the metropolitan government. It's a totally confused layout of responsibilities. Because if I ask you, who is the boss of the metropolitan transport in Barcelona, you would...
To measure Barcelona?
No.
No, transport.
Transport.
No.
Metropolitan transport. Not just you. Many people, even sometimes myself, I don't know exactly who is now the responsible of the metropolitan transport of Barcelona. And this is a good example of what is not working now. We need to, of course, to keep urban planning alive. It's not just the question of redesigning the CERDA plan, that, by the way, it can be redesigned, why not? We began the recovery of the inner aisles. That could go on, and we can do, you know, but sometimes we are afraid of doing things because too many people will disagree, etc. I don't know why. But I think that this is a huge problem for Barcelona now, and a mistake, and that we need to have the courage to challenge ourselves and to dare to change whatever is needed to change, to be changed.
But can I
Yes,
add,
how do you see that from London?
Can I add to this?
Please.
Because when we are talking about the city like a body, right? I like that idea. It's like a metabolism. You know, as we get older, we need to have small little operations here and there, you know? We need to maybe replace a pump or have something done to our arms or our kidneys or whatever. And cities, as the Dr. Mayer has just said, you know, are not unlike metabolisms. And therefore to have this idea of the open city, not the closed city, is really, really important. And in fact, when Joan, myself, and Richard Sennett and Saskia Sassen were addressing the United Nations, I think 45,000 urbanists from around the world in Quito, we had effectively came up with a manifesto which was the opposite of certainty. In fact, the 2 or 3 key words were the notion of incompleteness, incrementality, and openness. And I would say, Joan, that actually the Cerda plan from the 1850s in Barcelona has been able to withstand considerable change, densification over time. Or the other great example, a little bit earlier in time, of the New York City, the Manhattan grid.
Manhattan, yeah.
It's a fantastic example of a city that has been in constant evolution and change. Areas that were warehouses became trendy places for artists, and now rich people's homes. But the grid remains central to that, and I think that is very much one of the very simple ideas, going back to the importance of planning, which allows that change to happen. But you have to have a vision of where the city is going.
Do we need that vision to review that plan?
Yes, because of course, when you want to touch something as strong as a plan, you need to have something in mind, because if not, it becomes just kind of a spontaneous experimentation, and this usually doesn't work. Huh? And that forces us to think about the future of our society and our economy, huh? And even the post-COVID-19, how is the COVID-19 going to affect our economy, our society, our environment? This is the big question, because once you have an hypothesis, you can direct the future transformation of the city. Because if you don't have any hypothesis, or you don't dare to imagine the future, then there you are condemned to follow the pre-existing model. And this is a problem. Huh? This is why I don't share this vision now fashionable in Barcelona about tactic design or tactic urbanism. I think that urbanism as a multidisciplinary discipline is not just about the ordering of the public space. Is the ordering of the public space, is the ordering of the built area and its interrelationship. And that is not tactical. To me, it's a very, it cannot be tactical. You know, perhaps if you don't know what to do exactly, or you don't have money, or you don't, then you can do some public space tactical ordering, but not urbanism, because urbanism has to do with also the built space. For example, the issue of density,
for example,
which is crucial to any city. I understand, Ricky, that London has been densifying in the last years.
And the last 20 years, since we had an elected mayor, yes.
Okay, and now in Barcelona there's a kind of ideology against densification. When the rest of the world...
And why is so important densification?
Because densification has many good design, by the way, we need to say good designed densification. Okay. It's not overcrowding.
Okay.
It should be well designed densification. It's very related for the economic productivity of the city. The city, it's a productive engine. It's a labor market. And as big the labor market is, more efficient is the city. And this is, for example, very important in cities like London. Why London is a success? Because it's a huge labor market.
And would this be the same after COVID?
Yes.
Do you think
so? Of course, yes. You know, contrary to the common, perception, epidemics have been with us since the beginning of the humanity. And cities have suffered huge epidemics, including Barcelona, by the way. The plague in the Middle Ages, cholera, yellow fever, let's mention it. With mortality rates 30 or 40 times bigger than the current one. Now we are at 1 per 100, I think, or 1 per 1,000, I don't know, mortality rate. During the plague, we were 30 times more. Out of 10 people, 3 died in the plague of Barcelona in 1344, I think it was. And the city survived. After 2 or 3 years of the pandemic, the city survived. Then the cities are going to survive, not because cities has any kind of mystical property, because cities are an engine of economic productivity, and it's the place of the labor market, and especially in the new economy. If that was already true in the pre-industrial economy, and it was true in the industrial economy, in the post-industrial economy, that's even more true. Then the cities are going to succeed to pass over the pandemic, and because it's the most efficient economic engine that the humanity has developed till now.
Ricky, something to add to that, yes, and maybe if I can introduce an additional comment. Probably you know very well about Paris' initiative of 15-minute city. So putting things around people in order they have no more than 15 minutes to reach any of the services or work that you have in a city. This is, I wouldn't say the contrary of the idea of density.
No,
but
no,
it's
just the contrary. It's for the density.
Exactly. What could you add to all of this debate?
Well, I think there are 2 or 3 things which I've said which are important to reflect on, and I'll come back to the 15-minute city. The first of all, I think the great planner of the city of Chicago made the very important statement which says, make no little plans. In other words, when you think of cities, you've got to think big. That doesn't mean large. You have to have a major concept, as Joan was saying, about the direction of travel of where you want your society to be. And then small things can happen, but you can't do everything, I think, from the bottom up with small-scale projects. Otherwise, you suffer from the classic problem of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. I don't want a sewage plant next to here and all that. The second point I wanted to connect with what Joan was saying about cities as engines of the economy. For 11,000 years, people have been coming close together in order to basically improve their opportunities in life. There's this wonderful saying in the city of Mumbai, which is, of course, an amazing place with maybe 15, maybe 25 million people. Nobody really knows. It changes day and night. It has vast areas of informal development that some people call slums. I don't. And there's a saying there that millions of people keep on coming back to it, and they refer to it as Mumbai as the bird of gold. In other words, it offers you an opportunity to come in and then fly. In other words, to liberate yourself, to improve yourself, to gain employment and improve life not only for yourself, for your children. And I think from that point of view, many of us who study cities around the world can only agree that that is the case, and that will continue to be the case. But the planning regimes, as we've already been saying in the last few minutes of conversation, need to adapt to this new reality and not be fossilized or out of date, which they often are. And when we're talking about the impact of public health and the COVID or previous pandemics, I want to add one other very famous example in London in 1854, when London had a massive cholera outbreak. Now, the reaction was to have the very first proper planning of the sewage system, which allowed London to become the first efficient, well-organized mega city at that time. So we should grasp these opportunities, but you have to have the governance structures in place to do that. Now, the 15-minute city to which you are referring to is the current brainchild of Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, recently re-elected. But as Ron and I know, it's been there for a very long time. It's not a particularly new thing. And it's a good thing, because it implies that cities shouldn't just have one very dense and active center and then the rest become suburban sprawl or dead cities. It implies a sort of what we would call in the industry, and I'm sorry to use a technical word, the polycentric or multi-centered city with different places which are active. You know, in your city it would be the equivalent of the area of Poblenou or the area near the port. Each area has a certain sort of DNA about its economy and much else. But you know, to make something like that work requires massive investment in public transport. So it's not just a bottom-up cube thing. It requires exactly what we've been saying: well-structured thinking, top-down intervention in terms of transport. Otherwise, the 15-minute city will never work.
So, being both of you seated here, I could not skip a question. Is what do you think about big events in a city? Are they really something that can help the cities to grow, the cities to change? Are still something that really adds or implies an opportunity for a city? What do you believe about the big events in a city? Ricky.
So you're asking me the big events as in Olympics and
for
example,
things of that.
Well, speaking for two, you introduced me completely incorrectly.
Sorry.
By saying that I'm similar. I'm similar to Jean Claude as being a great transformer. I'm not. I wasn't elected to be a mayor, and I didn't lead initiatives, but I was an advisor to the mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, when we held the Olympics. The answer to your question, Aurora, is very simple. Big events can absolutely mess up cities, be very negative in terms of what happens in a city, or, as a few examples, and I think London and Barcelona stand out, they can be incredibly positive. But my qualifier would be is that the events should be used to work within the grain, within the vision which has already been established politically of where the city wants to go. In the case of the London example, and then we'll hear more, obviously I don't need to talk about your city, but in the London example, we have had for the last 100 years an imbalance between a very poor east and a very rich west. Okay? The east side is always underserviced, not much infrastructure, and greater poverty. We use the Olympics as the beginning of a 30-year period of reinvestment into East London, the poorer area. And as a result, it's not that we only had 1 million people over 2 or 3 weeks over that summer 2012. That's not the point. The point is that 100,000 new jobs have been created, many of them actually at the lower end of the scale, so for people who live in the area. Many of them are jobs that a lot of the women in the area are able to apply and use because they're not full-time, and therefore they continue to play the important family role. But importantly, something like 40,000 homes have been built, of which 35% are social and affordable. One of the highest densities of new housing in London, alongside parks, aquatic swimming pools, and other facilities. But going back to the very first point, the only reason this big event, I think, has worked, and I think we're now 8 years after the Olympics, and most Londoners think it's a good thing, and it was a good use of public money, for sure. You have to see it as part of this bigger planning vision and not just as an isolated event.
What do you think, Joan?
See, I think that I cannot explain better than Ricky my ideas about that. Is not for the sake of the big event. Is the use that you have in mind for the big event. You know, in the case of the Olympic Games, we wanted the Olympic Games of Barcelona just to overcome the huge economic crisis of Barcelona at that time. And we needed the ring road, we needed the new airport, we needed to recover the seafront, we needed to create new jobs. We needed, at the end, to help the transformation of an industrial city to a post-industrial city. And this is why in Barcelona, we fight quite a huge battle in order to have the mayor as the chair of the local Olympic Committee organizing the games. In other parts, they have not been so fortunate because the main objective of the games was not sports in our mind. It was the transformation of the city. Then, therefore, big events, as Ricky has said, can be useful or unuseful, and that depends on your ideas. By the way, we were very scared during the Olympic Games because the 4 previous cities, they got bankrupt.
Yeah.
Montreal went bankrupt, Mexico went bankrupt, I think, I don't remember which were the other 2. It was, a mess. It was a kind of fate that whoever wanted to organize the games, it was going to have a bankruptcy. In fact, the Olympic Committee, when the Olympic Games of Los Angeles, they didn't choose Los Angeles. They went to Los Angeles to ask, please, would you like to organize the games? Because it was no candidate willing to organize any games. Therefore, big events or no big events, this is a bad debate. It's not driving in the good direction. What is?
Aurora, can I
Yes,
continue
please.
on that? Because it's very important for your public to understand how influential what Joan has just said has been, not just to your city, but to other cities that followed in their steps, in your steps. So when we decided in London to bid for the Olympic Games, a document was prepared and a series of public events were held. And Pasquale Maragall was then mayor, and then Joan followed shortly afterwards. Not only came to London, but we used the Barcelona model, as we used it, as what we wanted to do. We wanted to steal your ideas in a very successful way. And only a few years later, in fact, Joan Maragall and others came to London because the most important architectural institution in this country, the Royal Institute of British Architects, for the first time in its history, decided to give the gold medal to a city. First time in its history. And it gave it to Barcelona for exactly the reasons we're talking about. We mustn't underestimate the phrase that Joan used about density is fine, but it has to be well designed, right? You need to combine a whole series of different elements. And I think for me, the word design means much more than proportion, materials, and elegance. Design is about coordination and linking a political vision with a reality on the ground. And the success of the big events has also a lot to do with that. What we've been able to do in our case in London, as you did in the '92 Olympics, when you gave the water, the waterfront, your wonderful measure back to the city, we were able to create a fantastic new for people in East London who have never had such an asset. So those are small but important examples of the models that one has to follow.
Talking about design, what do you think? I mean, does it make any sense to talk about the strict district city of Barcelona, or should we talk about the big Barcelona? I mean, thinking in city planning, in urban planning, what is the scope of the aim? Should we speak or should we talk only about the city, or it's a bigger area that we have to take into account?
Of course, we need to talk about all the scales, and probably now, after the COVID, we need to speak mainly about the metropolitan big scenario, as London is able to do, no? Because if we keep refraining our activity to small areas, we don't gain the perspective or the size that Ricky was mentioning about Chicago. I think that you need to have a big vision. By the way, when Cerdà planned the Cerdà plan, he planned the Cerdà plan for the metropolitan area of Barcelona at that time, because the Barcelona at that time was the old city of Barcelona, what now we know as Ciutat Vella. And it affected several municipalities like Sarrià, Gràcia, Sant Andreu, Sant Martí, which were independent municipalities.
Yeah, they don't come to be Barcelona
therefore,
next century.
This is why urbanism, it can't be tactic, needs to be strategic, because you don't need, in the current 21st century, to solve the urbanism like it was solved in the 18th century or 19th century with drawings. But you need to establish strategies. And this is so because we have a unified labor market. Now the labor market of Barcelona is not the labor market of the city of Barcelona. It's the metropolitan or regional labor market. You know, a lot of people lives in Barcelona and works outside, and the other way around. Therefore, what is relevant is the economic function of the city. And this is something that sometimes is not in the minds of local politicians or even sometimes in urban planners. And I think that that should be incorporated to the new urbanism. The new urbanism needs to consider the livelihood means of the people living around the city, because if we don't consider the livelihood means, we are going to have a huge social mess. You know, we even need to talk about the social contract. Like, where is the housing? At what price? How we commute? How many hours we take to commute? And that is not something that you can solve if you only think about. This is something that with Oriol Bohigas would be very interesting to debate, because of course he was defending always the project. And that has marked a period of urbanism in Barcelona, the project. But I think that he didn't put the project against the urbanism. I once talked with him, I said, okay, with Cerdà, for you it's easy to talk about the project because you have the big problem already addressed. But if you go to Nairobi, there's no point that you can address Nairobi only with the project. Therefore, I think that this is a very important, and answering your question, of course, that's now the metropolitan area, the regional area of Barcelona. And I think that Ricky probably...
Do you agree with Joan?
The issue of where do you draw the boundary of the footprint of the city is really important. And in many ways, that boundary has become a little bit more unstable as a result of tech and IT, right? It's not, there isn't just a definitive line. But on the other hand, I'm a great believer in recognizing, let's call it the metropolitan hinterland, the regional dimension, because you can't think of cities as small little identities on their own, right? A close friend who Joan and I have already referred to, Saskia Sassen, was the first to identify the global connectivity as being fundamental. But regional connectivity is just important. The point has just been made about how much time to spend commuting. You know, Nairobi will be what? 2 hours average commuting time. Mexico City, Sao Paulo, 4 hours average commuting time. You know, these are numbers which in Europe we're lucky not to have to face. But you can only address that with a sort of literally metropolitan plus wide framework and in investment. In many cases, just picking up this issue of, you know, Joan, you've been very kind about London and all that, but we have a very significant potential dark period around the corner. And that's got nothing to do with planning and nothing to do with some of the issues we've talked about now, but with the ridiculous own goal of Brexit, right? The fact that people will not be able to freely come here with the skills, for example, to service technology, finance, gaming. London is now at the top in terms of medical research and other facilities even before COVID, and gaming technology absolutely up there. If we can't have access to that skills base of educated, cosmopolitan people, London will begin to suffer very, very significantly, as it will if it doesn't provide affordable housing for exactly those sorts of people, let alone access to work permits. So yes, it becomes metropolitan, but even beyond that, the life of the city is not just in the city.
Talent is a key thing for every city. So I don't think we have much time. I have many other questions to put on the table, but the time is over. So thanks to both of you for your open conversation and debate. Thank you for your ideas. And let me conclude this session with a local call. Barcelona, the great Barcelona, needs more urban planning. We do need to use urban planning as a way to open the city to new opportunities, to face our current challenges, and to keep building a better city for all. So let's make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a los tres, lo decía Aurora hace unos momentos. Lo que necesita Barcelona es planificación, generar esas oportunidades, y de hecho esa es la esencia del Vinio. Estamos aquí para abordar todas estas cuestiones y que a partir de aquí salgan este tipo de soluciones. Ponían el ejemplo de Francia, esos 15 minutos para llegar a todos sitios, el efecto también de Londres para rebajar las desigualdades entre unos barrios más pobres y otros barrios más ricos. Hablábamos de Barcelona, todo ello para intentar pues reorganizar esas ciudades hacia un urbanismo nuevo y adaptado a nuestras necesidades. Este ha sido el panel que hemos presenciado ahora mismo. Muchísimas gracias a los tres. 740 personas han estado siguiéndolo en streaming. Recuerden que tenemos 6 canales, que en el 6º está toda la oferta cultural y gastronómica. Nosotros estamos en Real Estate, en Estación de Francia. Enseguida seguimos porque tenemos al segundo Inspirational Talk del día. Estaremos con Jorge Alonso, es arquitecto urbanista, y seguro que este Inspirational nos va a emocionar muchísimo. Así que volvemos en unos minutos.